It is not that we were only doing an operations, we are also keeping an eye on how were the outcomes. So this is on your left is one of the earlier papers from the Amrita Institute when they started their neonatal program. And they had an 8.8% mortality rate, 10% bloodstream infections, but a lot of water has flown under the bridge and the results are dramatically different and improved now, but we did keep an eye of what we are doing. The other paper is from Jayadeva Institute, around 1,000 patients racked stratified with a 7% in-hospital mortality rate, again a marker that we were keeping an eye on what we were doing. We collected the entire data from the state of West Bengal through a public funded program, and in this particular paper, the last 10 years of work of multiple centers is collated, around 11,483 surgical patients with a 5.2% in-hospital mortality rate. This is a systematic review published in Annals of Pediatric Cardiology recently from All India Institute, and this assessed all the papers which have outcome delineated in them from India. And the overall mortality, in-hospital mortality only was 5.6% in 135 Indian studies of 30,000 patients. Of course, the mortality, if you compare to STS benchmark or other benchmarks, Western benchmarks, it is more. But 5.6% to me was a reasonable outcome that we did in very challenging circumstances. Dr. Rajesh Sharma wrote a very poignant editorial in response to this, saying that this is probably a case of comparing apples versus oranges. Our realities are different. We see them late. We see them in much more moribund state. Our ITU situations are very heterogeneous depending on the facilities we work in. And in spite of that, having a 5% is a journey that we have made. I'm not saying that we should rest on our laurels, but we have made a journey and we should continue this journey further to improve upon. The IQIC registry, which assesses the LMIC mortality rate in a heterogeneous subset of all comers for congenital heart surgery, again had an in-hospital mortality of 5% in all children less than 18 years of age. So that is where we stand as far as science is concerned. We as a country have had a significant quantum of work. We have innovated significantly, and we have kept an eye on where we are going in terms of results. Coming now to the most challenging aspect of delivering this particular care is the economic part of it. How does a congenital heart surgery affect a family in India? This is again a very elegant paper from Amrita Institute by Dr. KK, and this evaluated the microeconomic impact of congenital heart surgery on a family's income. And if you see, an average median was 200,000 Indian rupees, which was 0.93 times our per capita annual income. So basically, one family's annual income is completely wiped off by one surgery. So of course, 1 in 2 families actually reported overwhelming financial stress. Half of them borrowed money, and that is how they managed. And that is how this impacts the family financially. Funding remains the main barrier in all the studies that have been published, and this is again a systematic review in the World Journal, which claimed that financial constraints is one of the main challenges. In addition to other things, we do have delayed diagnosis, we have insufficient caregiver education, we have social stigmas associated with it, but the main challenge still remains funding. This was also covered very elegantly when Dr. Iyer was delivering his presidential oration, The Cry of the Children, when he talked about these challenges. We had a special issue in our Indian journal dedicated to congenital heart surgery, where our guest editor, Dr. Rajesh Sharma, highlighted the same issue. In Annals of Pediatric Cardiology recently, Dr. Ramakrishnan conducted a pan-India survey about finding out who bears the cost. And we all contributed the data. I'm sure many of us have contributed to this particular data. And what came out of it is classified it into 3 groups: government hospitals, charity hospitals, private hospitals. And if you see carefully, not more than 1/3 comes from out-of-pocket expenditure. So 24.9% in public facilities, 31% in private facilities. Rest of it is all funded by some form of a government-funded scheme, or it is by philanthropy or by some NGO organization. So not more than 1/3 of the population actually has the capacity and actually pays out of pocket, and that is not a realistic solution for this. However, under the circumstances, I feel we still do a very reasonable job of it. The costing, the pricing of congenital heart surgery, it is not a flat world at all. An arterial switch surgery in public hospital will cost less than $1,000 in India. In some of the private hospitals can go up to as high as $3,500. However, if you compare it to the median cost in US, Dr. Ram Subramaniam is here, the median cost is $82,000 US. A tetralogy repair in UK costs on an average £26,000. So I think under the circumstances, we still do a fairly reasonable job. Dr. Ashish Kadava published in our journal a survey of a status report on availability and access. And this was data collected from 193 countries. And we classified the countries according to the access and availability. AAA would mean that there are excellent services available and accessible to all. AAO means it is available, but it's not accessible to all. AOO means it's available in patches, and NAO means it's not available. We are in that unfortunate segment where it is available and it is not accessible to all. Government-funded schemes, mainly RBSK, has changed a lot of things about congenital heart surgery. A lot, probably millions of patients have undergone surgeries through this, some form of a government-funded scheme in various states. We call it Shishu Shati in our state. It has made a difference. However, there are important challenges associated with these funds because obviously a large amount of care is being delivered in private hospitals. This was the Hridayam study from Kerala, which actually showed that through the public-private partnership with RBSK, the infant mortality rate was brought down significantly once the CHD started being treated at an appropriate time. So the impact of it can be really meaningful, and it is almost like a game changer for infant mortality. Again, going back to this paper, which we published in the World Journal, it's a 10-year period of public-private partnership patients and 25,000 patients. This is probably one of the world's largest series of public-funded CHD care, both intervention and surgery, 11,000 surgical patients, rack stratified with a 5.2% in-hospital mortality rate. This is a paper from Chennai, which is a co-funding model in which part of the fund comes from the government, part of the fund comes from philanthropy, and hospital also subsidize the rate, and thereby the care is being delivered. But is that enough? As I said, a significant proportion, almost more than half of this care is delivered in private hospitals. And how do they assess viability? So we are inundated with terms in our business review meetings with contribution margin, RPOB, average revenue per occupied bed, EBITDA, and how do they assess? What is the so-called current corporate definition of profitability or sustainability? It is a persistently changing goalpost. We can never change it. So the current RPOP targets, which would be considered healthy, is around 50,000 INR per day, the contribution margin of 80% and above. When you do congenital heart surgery, 50% of your patients would be infant, 10% of them being neonates. I don't think it is a target we can ever achieve with a healthy margin. So that is our reality. Insurance has a big role to play, but in spite of the IRDAI giving a mandate that all congenital heart defects have to be covered, the reality is different. Most of the CHD claims are rejected, being classified as a pre-existing condition. The advocacy for CHD compared to, let's say, HIV is at infancy. So the advocacy is still just starting off. It's very timid. If a parent or a mother is insured, the newborn should automatically get covered, and that still remains a distant goal. To top it, even the parental coverage for insurance is very low, so that is another challenge that insurance actually can't match up our needs. Summarizing the economic reality, funding remains the most important challenge. Less than 30% can actually afford out-of-pocket expenditure. We often fall short to meet the corporate definition of profitability, and maintaining these programs in private facilities remains a challenge because of this, because the government-funded scheme, although they have improved the access tremendously and I'd give it to them, however, a fixed, relatively low per case payout makes it unattractive for private players to play along. Philanthropy often falls short because we have got such a huge disease burden. Insurance coverage, as we saw, is near non-existent. This has been our small contribution. We have been doing approximately around 500 cases per annum for a decade or so in the unit that I run. And if I have to summarize the CHD India story, I would say that the art of congenital heart surgery has been perfected in this part of the world. We have laid some solid, small foundations of science in this country. Let us resolve that economics does not come in the way of furthering this beautiful craft of ours. There has to be a way. I have done sacrilege, and I have pardon my audacity, I have modified Gurudev Rabindranath Tagore's this particular poem, which is very famous, Where the Mind is Without Fear, with a CHD version. And I would want 30 seconds of yours to indulge me. where the mind is without doubt and the head is held proud, where training is proper and infrastructure complete, where the world has not been broken up into fragments by narrow economic categories of patients, where words come out from the depth of true databases, where tireless striving stretches its arms towards making it accessible for all, where the clear stream of reason has not lost its way into the rampant misuse of antibiotics, where the mind is led forward by thee into that ever-widening audits and introspection, into that heaven of ideal care and outcomes, my Father, let my country awake. With apologies to the bard. Thank you for your attention, and thank you for indulging me for almost 30 minutes. This is a Fontan survivor leading a football team. I thought it would just be an inspirational video. Thank you again.
The Indian Association of Cardiothoracic and Vascular Surgeons, by virtue of authority in it, recognizes and felicitates Dr. DEBASIS Das with the K. N. DASTUR Memorial Oration for his innumerable and noteworthy contributions to the subspecialties of cardiothoracic surgery. His commendable services to the nation, society, and progress of cardiothoracic surgery have been recognized in a manner befitting the virtues of the memory of Dr. K. N. DASTUR. In testimony wherein we have subscribed our signatures and caused the seal of the association fixed here unto 22nd of February 2025, duly signed by President Dr. Manoj Duraraj, Secretary Dr. C.S. Hiremath.